Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 1st of January of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And as you understand from the title of the video, the first day of 2024 and the Russians managed to destroy the first HIMARS system. But before we start discussion about the HIMARS, let's talk about the southern part of Ukraine, because we have, as you can see, lots of very interesting geolocations and significant number of icons. According to information we have, the Russians launched and started the most massive attack of Odessa region with not just Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev region with drones, with Gerans drones. The Ukrainians during the previous night from the 31st of December to the 1st of January published significant number of videos of their air defense work, and as a result of this video we can see that some of the Russian drones were shot down by the Ukrainians. Some Ukrainian missiles failed to attack and fell down inside of the residential area, causing significant damage to civilians. But as a result of strikes during the night, we start receiving some updates of some videos. For example, on these scenes we see how the Ukrainians managed to shoot down another Russian Gerans drone, and the drone fell down in the residential area, and then we see that some building was set on fire. And just in the morning we start receiving more or less videos and photo confirmations of result of Russian strikes from residential area. A lot of buildings were damaged as a result of explosions, and this is the residential area in Odessa. And for example, on this video we can see, this video is geolocated by the way, how one of the Odessa block was almost reduced to ruins as a result of either air defense strike, work of Ukrainian forces, or Gerans strike. Anyway, the village, the Odessa and the settlements around Odessa were under very heavy fire during the night from 31st of December to the 1st of January. And you may ask, what was the purpose of those attacks? And obviously during the previous night the Ukrainians themselves wanted to, or at least had some plans to attack Crimea, because the Ukrainian intelligence service published the video of their Navy drone somewhere in the vicinity of Crimea. And this is a very important video, not just because of the fact that Ukrainians managed to get so close to Crimea. The most important part from this video is that this Navy drone of Ukrainian forces was equipped by missiles. It's not, of course, HIMARS missiles or not like Iskander or something like this. It's just regular or something like anti-tank missiles. But the most important thing, that these Navy drones were equipped with this type of weapon, and that was not just like attack against Crimea, whole Crimea. That was just a media attack, test attack, to show the Western investors, the Western countries, that Ukrainians have some kind of superiority or power or some influence in the Black Sea, and they can control this area, forcing the Russians to step back. By the way, during the New Year speech, when Zelensky was talking and making some celebrations for Ukrainians, he talked a lot about the Black Sea, and he was talking about some control over this area, and that the Russians don't have 100% control over this territory. And this video is another evidence that Ukrainians try to show that they do have power in this area. And to tell the truth, these drones with missiles is a very bad thing for the Russians. So this is the reason why the Russians were attacking Odessa. Basically, the Russians were trying to secure the New Year Eve, New Year holidays for Crimean people, and not to allow the Ukrainians to attack Russia, the territory under Russian control, with any type of missiles, including, let's say, Neptune missiles or Storm Shadow missiles or HIMARS strikes or something like this. And as we understand, because of that massive attack, the Russians managed to do this. According to some sources, during the previous night, the Russians used 90 drones, so 90 drones just from the night from 31st of December to the 1st of January. And also the same sources are saying that from the night from 30th to 31st of December the last year, the Russians used 50 drones. So basically, if we summarize today's, around 140 drones were used in Odessa area just during the previous 2 days. Just imagine yourself the level of Russian strike and level of attack. It was like one of the most powerful attacks since the beginning of the special military operation. Now we are moving to Kherson area, and we also have a lot of updates from this territory, and probably the most important one is that after a very long operational pause, the Russians started publishing the videos of the use of FAB 500 and FAB 1500s. I'm not saying that this video is fresh one, maybe this strike took place few or 3 days ago, but the most important that the Russians start publishing. And according to the Ministry of Defense, after they managed to destroy the IRIS-T air defense system of the Ukrainian forces, the Russians start including aviation bombs into their Ministry of Defense report. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing not just like cities and villages along Dnipro River. The Russians continued their military routine by bombing the Ukrainian warehouses, ammo depots deep inside of Ukrainian territory, in deep rear to the north of Tyaginka. On this instance, we see how the Russians destroyed another Ukrainian warehouse with probably even another FAB, or something like this. A little bit to the southwest, the Russians destroyed another Ukrainian artillery position, probably as a result of counter-artillery duels. So the situation is the same in Tyaginka and Dnipro River. So this year the Russians will continue their clashes and attempts to force the Ukrainians to step back from their bank of the river. Now we're moving to Zaporizhzhia area, and we got also a lot of updates from this territory. As we discussed, according to some sources without any geolocated confirmation, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the western part of Robotyne, and the Russians managed to improve their positions on the southwestern part of the same area. And as a result of Russian counter-offensive operation, they managed to restore control over these trenches and these fortifications. So as you can see, the situation for the Ukrainians develops not in a very good manner, not in their favor, obviously. And according to some military experts, the Russians managed to establish control over most hills in this area, and the Ukrainians were forced to step back to the lowlands. Obviously, when they had control over the hills, they have more or less chances to control this territory and to wait for the spring. But as soon as they were forced to step back to the lowlands, the Ukrainians lost any hope for saving their positions during the winter, January and February period of time. I'm not saying that the Russians are going to attack immediately. Now they have established fire control not just over the northern part of Robotyne, over the main tactical support road that goes from Novomykhailivka to the village. Obviously, the Russians control the same territory, the village, from the south and southwest. On this video, we see the beginning of the Russian clearing process. They are attacking the Ukrainian trenches and fortifications with FPV drones. This video was geolocated, which means that probably the Russians soon are going to start the ground operation in this area, obviously after 7th or 8th of January. Now we are moving to the South Donetsk direction. We have also a lot of updates, as we discussed in the previous video. The Russians just for a New Year night published significant number of videos of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian positions in Novomykhailivka, and this is not just like the beginning of the clearing process with FPV drones. So this is, as I understand, is the final phase of the clearing operation with FPV drones. Maybe 5-6 more days the Russians need to secure this area completely, and after that they will launch significant attack, trying to establish control over Novomykhailivka with a very fast and unexpected way. I'll remind you that the beginning of January is the period of Russian Orthodox Christmas. So the final Russian Orthodox Christmas take place on the 7th of January. So I don't expect any massive attacks from the Russian side from the 1st of January till 7th of January. During the next 7 days, we are going to see massive attacks with FPV drones, with artillery systems, with FAB 500 and FAB 1500s. And the main purpose of these upcoming attacks will be to clear the territory and to secure and to prepare this or that direction for further Russian offensive. And the 8th of January, the Russians obviously are going to attack from many directions, trying to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt completely completely, and at least to get some progress in Novomykhailivka and at least on Robotina area. Furthermore, we got another video from Novomykhailivka published by the Russian forces. On this scene we can see the Russian soldiers who were moving, take a look, without any rifles or guns along the road from Volnovakha to Novomykhailivka. This video was geolocated, and the soldiers was just talking about the common situation, about they were showing the destroyed armored vehicles. The Russians were saying that these tanks that you can see on the video belonged to them, though they were destroyed during previous Russian attacks. And as you can see, there are a few important things we need to note. First of all, the Russians are moving very safely. They're not afraid of anything. They don't have rifles, which means that these positions are located very far from the combat line, and this is a very important video. So as I understand, just based on this video, the Russians have better positions on the south of Novomykhailivka. Something tells me that probably the Russians managed to establish control over something like this. Yet we haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation of that, but this video with the very, let's say, Russian soldiers moving on east tells me that the progress is something like this. Now we're moving to Avdiivka area, and as we discussed in the previous video, I have updated the map according to the geolocation that was published by the Ukrainian forces. I'll remind you that Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces in the northern part of Avdiivka with FPV drones, which means the Russian progress and complete control over these trenches and this stronghold. So this is the only probably progress the Russians managed to achieve, but anyway, this is very important one. Using this stronghold, the Russians are able to dig in deeper, to concentrate and collect some critical mass before further offensive operation, because when talking about Stepova, the situation develops not in Russian favor, not in Ukrainian either. On this, for example, video that was published by the Ukrainian site, we can see the battlefield. The battlefield is in Robotina. You can see significant number of armored vehicles that were destroyed from both sides, either from the Russians and the Ukrainian side. This is not just Russian armored vehicles. There are like a mix of armored vehicles from both sides, and we see how tough and how difficult clashes are there. The Russians still don't have complete control, secured control over this territory. Neither the Ukrainians are able to restore complete control over this area. So as we understand, the clashes are going to continue. The only thing, important thing from this direction, we can publish another Russian FPV drone somewhere to the southwest of Stepova. The Russians discovered, tracked and targeted the Ukrainian armored vehicle somewhere in this area, which confirms once again that clashes for this territory continues. So Stepova, Berdichi, as you can see, no tactical progress for both sides, neither for the Russians nor for the Ukrainians. And as I understand, this year the Russians and Ukrainians will continue fighting. The only thing that I have a feeling that the Russians will change their tactics and will rethink the value and the main purpose of this attack, because we have a lot of updates from Veselaya, Krasnogorovka and Terikon. On this video, for example, the Ukrainian sources published a number of series of videos of FPV drones strikes against the Russian positions along this line, which confirms the further Russian progress from the village by the name of Veselaya to the south in direction of this fortification belt. And now the Russians maybe have already cleared, maybe tried to clear this territory to create a stable foothold, which will allow the Russians to continue advancing further to the south in direction of Avdiivka from the northeastern part. I'll remind you that during the previous days we got a lot of geolocations confirming the Russian progress in this residential area by the name of Dachi Militseyskia. The Russians, according to the latest geolocations, managed to reach this line, and now we understand that maybe the Russians have already started the clearing and further offensive operation in this direction. So we see both two lines show us the approximate Russian plan for the January and February of 2024, and that this is one of the areas the Russians managed to achieve significant results. The second area where the Russians managed to achieve almost the same results are taking place in the industrial area and in the vicinity of the former air defense base. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction, and we have the most important update. The Russians published the video how on the 1st of January of 2024, they managed to discover the Ukrainian HIMARS system. On this footage, on this video, we can see how the Ukrainian HIMARS were trying to attack the Russians somewhere in the vicinity of Kurdyumovka on the north of Avdiivka. The Russians managed to discover, they tracked this system till the evacuation zone somewhere along the tree lines, and after that, as soon as the Russians, let's say, realized that HIMARS system stopped, they start bombing this area with multi-launch rocket systems, which also very important because, as you can see, the Russians understood that they don't have enough of time to call Lancet, to use Tornado S system, or to use Iskander. They realized that they have just one chance, let's say, get rich or die trying, something like this, and they start bombing this area with everything they have. The Russians, as you can see, were not counting their ammo, their rounds. They were just bombing this territory with significant number of multi-launch rocket systems, and with one purpose: to be sure that this system, HIMARS system, will be hit at least with some parts and from explosion of these multi-launch rocket system like rounds. So as a result of this series of strikes, that system was destroyed. And when talking about the common situation, of course, 1st of January and the first HIMARS system, obviously this is like significant victory for the Russian side. When talking about Bakhmut, Artemov's direction, we got also a lot of geolocations coming from Kurdyumovka, Andreevka area. If you remember, just yesterday we have already discussed the Russian offensive operation along the railways from Kurdyumovka to Andreevka, and we got a geolocated confirmation how the Russians, as a result of another attack, managed to establish complete control over this stronghold and to clear this area with some platoon of infantry. And after a small operational pause that probably took place just one day, the Russians took a decision to continue their movements and continue their offensive operation further along the railways to the north in direction of Andreevka. And today the Russian sources published the video of FPV drone strike and the beginning of clearing operation of these trenches with FPV drones, which confirms the beginning at least of the first stage of clearing operation. Obviously the Russians have already bypassed this period, this part of attack, and according to information, according to my understanding, as a result of another day of offensive operation, the Russians managed to improve their positions along the railways and to capture something like this. So the Russians are getting closer and closer to Avdiivka from the south, because the Ukrainians have significant problems on this direction. First of all, lack of manpower, lack of ammo depot, lack of ammo, rounds, and also on the same direction the Russians managed to destroy HIMARS system. So the problems continue develops in this area. When talking about northern part of Bakhmut, as we discussed in the previous video, the Russians also launched the active phase of clearing operation of the new cemetery of Chasov Yar, and probably as a result of another day of clashes, they managed to establish control completely over this territory. We need more geolocated confirmation of that, but at least the first geolocations of FPV drone strikes and bombing we have already received. So maybe the next 48 hours we're going to receive more updates and complete clearing of this territory. Furthermore, from the same direction, from the northwestern part of Bakhmut, we got another very interesting video from the Russian side. On these scenes we can see how the Russians discovered the Ukrainian artillery system that was supporting the Ukrainians somewhere in the vicinity of Bogdanovka, and the Russians attacked this artillery system with Lancet strike, with Lancet. And just take a look at the road that this Lancet was flying. Just take a look at this Lancet. He was flying to the bottom, then to the right, to the left, to the bottom, to the left. So it was like very interesting maneuvers from Lancet, and not just like primer strike, strict strike along one line. He was trying to fly in a different direction, and something tells me that probably the Ukrainians were trying to shut down the Russian Lancet with electronic warfare equipment, but the Russians managed somehow to bypass and penetrate this electronic warfare defense and destroy Ukrainian artillery system. Very interesting video. When talking about Kupiansk and Liman, during the previous day we haven't received anything from these directions. Probably there are very heavy clashes and a continued offensive operation, but without any geolocated videos. So this is the situation, and that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.